Hey guys, my name's Kenny, and I want to take a look at a biblical perspective of the sun, moon, and stars, how Christians should be looking at them. Are we dealing with astrology or astronomy here? You got the eclipse coming up on the 21st, the Revelation 12 sign on September 23rd of this year as well. We'll bounce back to the tetrads of 2014 and 15, kind of look at some numbers and things like that. So let's just dive right in. We're just going to go right through some scriptures here, starting in Genesis, and we'll end in Revelation chapter 12. So let's hop over to Genesis 1:14 real quick. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." So clearly, right off the bat, in the very first book of the Bible, in the very first chapter of the Bible, we see that the sun, moon, and stars are not just for date markers, for days, for months, and years, but they're also for signs. So let's head over to Daniel and see what he had to say. Daniel 6:27, He delivers and rescues. He works in signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. Even here, Daniel mentions signs and wonders in the heavens. God has control over the heavens. That is not Satan's domain. He cannot touch those. But he can manipulate people into thinking that they are something other than what they are actually designed for. And now we're going to head over to Jeremiah 10:2 and take a look at that as well. Jeremiah 10:2, Learn not the way of the nations, nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens, because the nations are dismayed at them. We're just going to keep on rolling. We're going to head over to Joel now. Here's Joel 2:30, And I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. We're going to head over to Psalms and see what David has to say. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. So that's kind of what I was talking about a minute ago. The sun, moon, and stars, the heavens declare God's handiwork, his glory, not Satan's. Even though Satan manipulates it and twisted it into his own narrative, they are not his. So when we look at the sun, moon, and stars for signs, we are actually seeing God do his work, which I think is pretty amazing. But let's continue with some more Old Testament scripture, and then we'll get into some New Testament scripture here. Job 9:9 says, Who made the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades, and the chambers of the south? And in Job 38:31 and 32, Can you bind the chains of Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season? Or can you guide the bear with its children? Job specifically calls out constellations by their name. Pleiades was a constellation that travelers and fishermen used all the time, literally to help them travel and to know when to fish. So, did Satan create the constellations or did God? That answer is pretty simple. God created the constellations. He set the stars where they are. Anybody that wants to spin a narrative that looking at the constellations is evil and sinful, they're wrong. Now, there's a big difference between worshiping those constellations and looking at them for signs. And when I say signs, I don't mean for a personal note to know what's going to happen that time of month in your personal life based on the month that you were born in. No, that's of Satan. That's not of God. So let's head over to the New Testament and look at some verses here, specifically in Matthew, Luke. I think we'll hit Acts, and we'll head over to Revelations 2. Now, a lot of these verses specifically deal with the tribulation period and what to look for to know when that is going to happen. Now, there's a lot of people out there and a lot of debates on a pre-tribulation rapture, midpoint tribulation rapture, and a post-tribulation rapture, and not even a rapture at all, just Christ's second coming. We're not going to get into that here, but we're going to head over to Matthew 24:29 real quick and read that passage. Here's Matthew 24:29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. If you were to continue reading Matthew verses 29 through 31, that's specifically talking about Christ's second coming. But we're going to move on over to Luke and see what Luke has to say about signs and sun, moon, and stars. Luke chapter 21, verses 25 and 26. And there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations and perplexity, because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. People fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Here we are again, wonders in the heavens above. I don't know how much more clear it can get, but let's head over to Revelation 12 and check out this passage as well. Revelation 12, 1 through 4. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. Another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Traditionally, verses 1 and 2 are interpreted as Israel being the woman that's travailing in birth, and the crown of 12 stars are Israel's 12 tribes. That very well may be true. I'm not going to debate that, but I want to offer up what seems might be a dual prophecy, or it might just be that theory and that conclusion is incorrect. But nevertheless, I want to show you a program called Stellarium. Now, Stellarium is an open source software, planetarium software, that allows you to basically stargaze. This is Stellarium's website. You can read up about it here. It's a really cool program. So here we are over in Stellarium. Let's take a look at what we see here. Well, right now we have Virgo and Leo, and there's Jupiter right here. Let's back up a couple days. About the 15th, I'd say. Clearly nothing cool is going on here. Nothing that depicts Revelation 12 right now. But let's take a look here. Could we possibly have a woman and a crown of 12 stars? Let's see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 stars. So no, currently we do not have that. But we're going to fast forward through this. I'm going to show you some crazy stuff. Alright, so we also have Virgo here. This is almost like her body. Now Jupiter, I want you to watch Jupiter. Watch what Jupiter does. So here we go. Alright, what do we see here? Let's go back to Leo. We already noted that Leo has 9 stars in its constellation. But we just added Venus, Mars, and Mercury, making 12 above her head. Venus, Mars, and Mercury are not stars. But back in John's time, there were no other planets. It was just stars. Everything were stars, minus the sun and moon. So if this is what he saw, he would have called them stars. So now we have, in John's mind, 12 stars above Virgo's head. Well, what else do we have? We have the sun right here, right at her hair, and we have the moon at her feet. But did she really travail in birth? Like, can you birth a planet? Well, as we just saw, Jupiter literally comes in, goes into a retrograde motion, and then comes out right between her legs, almost depicting a childbirth. Let's go back to June. I want to note something here. Right here. Jupiter kind of looks like it comes out of these lines, right? Well, if you've ever experienced your wife being pregnant, or you've had a kid, you've had your own child, you know, about this time in a pregnancy, what are we in, 7 months here? Your kid starts to kick around and move, and you start seeing little indents of feet, right? Also, let's note that artwork and constellation lines are not in the sky. So let's turn those off. Oops. Let's turn those off and take a look here. Oh, no lines, no artwork. Alright, so from Spica to this star, you can really tell that Jupiter went out of the line. I don't think so. Let's just turn these all back on just for fun. Okay, so let's go back forward. So on September 23rd, 2017, This is a pretty clear depiction of Revelation 12. Do I personally believe Revelation 12 is talking about these two constellations with Venus, Mars, and Mercury, the Sun, Jupiter, and the Moon? I would have to say yes. That's not negating Israel and her 12 tribes and that prophecy as well. What I'm saying is it could either be a dual prophecy or it could be one or the other. But I do believe we are in the end times. We're in the age of grace, and I do believe it is rapidly coming to a close. But specifically for these two constellations, with Venus, Mars, and Mercury, the Sun at her head, Moon at her feet, Jupiter literally doing a 42-week cycle and coming out between the legs. To me, that really does depict Revelation 12, 1 and 2. And that's a pretty literal interpretation, I would say. Isaac Newton is quoted to have said, "About the time of the end, a body of men will be raised up who will turn their attention to the prophecies and insist upon their literal interpretation in the midst of much clamor and opposition." I've looked at this sign since February, and I gotta tell you, when I first saw it, it blew me away. I didn't know how to react. What does this mean? Revelation's about end times and the destruction of the earth. Like, what is going on? What's important about this date right here? So if we take a look at the Jewish calendar, they have a feast a couple of days before this, starts a couple of days before this. That feast is the Feast of Trumpets. And when we read Revelations and all the verses associated with end times prophecy, we know that Christ will come back for his bride at the last trump. And Jewish tradition is on the Feast of Trumpets, they literally blow a horn that sounds like a trumpet. A lot of people are going to say, no one knows the day, no one knows the hour. Well, if you're looking at the verses in Matthew, I want you to read the verses above it where it's literally talking about the destruction of heaven and earth, not the rapture. That's been misconceived for generations. What I do want to say is, with the Feast of Trumpets and no one knows the day or hour, those two items go hand in hand because the new moon calls in the Feast of Trumpets. You don't know exactly what day you're going to be able to visibly see the crescent of the new moon. So it's called the day and hour no one knows, Feast of Trumpets. Now let's take a look at the eclipse, which is literally 33 days before this sign. The exact moment the eclipse starts in Oregon, the sun sets in Jerusalem. The eclipse starts in the 33rd state and ends at the 33rd parallel. It also crosses over 7 Salems. What do I mean by 7 Salems? Well, it starts in Salem, Oregon, and literally crosses over 6 more towns or cities called Salem. Something else that I found pretty interesting was from the last blood moon to September 23rd, 726 days transpire. Why do we care? Typically we wouldn't, but somebody dug into it and found out the Greek Strong's 726 number means harpazo. Harpazo translates to rapture. Something else that's pretty cool is September 23rd has 726 minutes of daylight. There's just so much now I can't chop it up to coincidence. You tell me, but what I do know is that our God is absolutely awesome. He works in mysterious ways. He can do anything that he wants, and he can use the heavens to declare his glory. He can talk to us through it. He can show us things. I do not believe that we are worshiping the sun, moon, and stars by looking at all this stuff. I think people are really being diligent and studying and searching for Christ, searching for God's works. That's what's important. Hope everybody enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, thanks.